so I could. Okay. All right, so this is much better? Yes, okay.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 14 of the Disabilities Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are meeting on today on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. I would ask that we start our meeting with a bit of a roll call, just so that everyone in the room is aware of who is actually in our committee room. And what I will do is ask those who have a microphone in front of you is to press the button so that the light comes on, so that you can say your name very clearly into the microphone. For those who may be following online, who cannot see, but they will be able to know who's in the room. So it's a bit of an attendance call. I'm going to start on my left, outside of the outside of our chambers.
Melissa Wong, Melissa Wong from Councillor Wongtam's office.
Great. And then we'll go into it.
Monica Winkler, Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work.
Joe Napper, committee member.
Martin Chrisels, a member.
Rahima Mullah.
Nicole Cormier, Accessibility Consultant, Equity, Diversity and Human Rights Office.
Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam, Chair of the committee.
Janice Dix, City Clerk's Office.
Stephanie Osorio, committee member.
Yin Brown, committee member.
Wendy Porch, committee member.
Darren Cooper, committee member.
Don Proszowski, committee member.
From Brookhart, committee member.
Here.
Lynn Genova, city clerks. Janet Kivel, city clerk.
Okay, wonderful. And then our presenters.
Good morning. I'm Casey Brendan from Revenue Services Division.
Sarah Jackson from Revenue Services Division.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Can I have are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Please indicate so. Seeing none, we'll move along. Can I have someone to move the adoption and confirmation of the minutes from February 8th, 2017, our meeting? I see Darren's hand, thank you. And all those in favor, we adopted that. None opposed. We do have the agenda that's printed on the goldenrod before you. Oh, I see. I recognize that you don't have it, but let me share with you what the agenda is. Item number 1 is the chair's report, which I will hold because I will come back and speak to that matter. And I think before we actually get to even right after the chair's report, I'll be calling upon the working groups to provide a quick update of their work. If your work did not result in an action that's now before us on the agenda, and I'll clarify that in a minute. Item number 14.2, the effectiveness of the redesigned utility bill. We're going to hold that for staff presentation, which will begin shortly. Item number 3, that's 14.3, there's a Canada 150 celebration, and we have a letter here from the Communications Working Group, and I want to know if anybody would like to hold that, or should we just adopt the recommendations in the letter? I know that Terry Lynn would like to speak to that, and Yin, since this is your letter, would you like us to hold this down for you? Okay, so we'll hold it down in your name, and we'll come back to it. Item number 4, that's 14.4, employment for persons with disabilities at the City of Toronto. This is a letter from Wendy Porch on behalf of the Employment Working Group. Wendy, would you like to hold down this item? Did you want to speak to it? Okay, so we'll come right back to that. And then item number 5, 14.5, the name of the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee. I'm sure we're going to have a discussion on this one. Monica, thank you very much for your letter. And we will hold that down for you. So I'm just going to go back to the top of the agenda and provide with to you the chair's report, and then I'm going to call upon the working groups, and I think the working groups would have organized themselves and appointed a lead person who's probably going to provide us a few remarks. If your item is on the actual agenda, you can say we'll get to that as we move through the agenda. If you don't have an item on the agenda produced through the working group, then perhaps you can speak to it and let us know what's going on. Okay, so we'll start with the chair's report then. Okay, I just wanted to point out to the committee members that Councillor Davis has now joined us, so welcome. Okay, so my chair's report is not going to be very long, but I did want to share with you that the updating of the city's multi-year accessibility plan, this is the item that went from our committee to the executive committee. Councillor Ainsley at the executive committee moved an additional motion to request staff to move ahead with changes to improve accessibility in committee rooms 1, 2, 3, and 4. And he asked that this be done in advance of the full report on the multi-year accessibility plan I can share with you that I know that the city clerk's office was trying to do that work. I think what Councillor Ainsley did was make the process much more public and give staff very clear direction that this should not wait. But I do know that they were already working on it, so it's not something that was a matter of new initiatives. It's just a matter of accelerating it. I just want to speak to item 12.4, which took place in 2 meetings before, and this was the item that was on the agenda called the bylaws and policies for encroachment on the right-of-way. If you will recall, DAC, this committee made a request. That request was moved by Stephanie Osorio to review the city's bylaw and policies related to authorizing encroachments on the right-of-way and to report back on that work to this committee on options to address situations where requested. And of course, this is largely done in response to accessibility requirements that the businesses and storefront businesses in particular needed to provide accessible access to. And somehow there were temporary devices and ramps that were installed on sidewalks that created additional impediments and obstacles because it now landed in the pedestrian right-of-way. So the intention was to find some clarity and to find a way to regulating it so that we're not left with enforcement on whims or perhaps different standards across the city, taking into consideration the needs of the businesses as well as the needs of people with diverse needs who need to use the sidewalks and right-of-ways. So that report, we have made that request. The reason I bring this up to you again, even though that request has gone in, is largely because you may have heard in the media about another conflict that has arisen. The one that initiated this particular request was regarding the Signs restaurant. We now have another situation that has emerged in Roncesvalles, and I think we want to find a way forward that will provide clarity for everyone and a consistent application and a method of approaching that situation. And then, of course, though, the working group support. I just want to report back, because I know that we've had individual conversations, and Melissa has tried to provide additional supports for the working groups. There was a request at our last meeting that a conference call line be available for DAC working members so that they could use to facilitate their meetings. We spoke to the city clerk's office, and we also reached out to the Equity, Diversity, and Human Rights office and asked them for a conference call line that could be used by the different working groups. We were told that no available instrument was going to be made to accommodate our working group. So for now, until we find a more permanent solution, working groups are welcome to use my office line until there is another solution. So we will try to help initiate those calls during office hours between 9 to 5. If the meeting happens in evening time, we'll also try to make that happen. But as long as it doesn't conflict with us using the conference line for a different meeting. So therefore, if you need, the working groups need a conference call line, we will use our conference call line temporarily until we find a more permanent solution from the city clerk's office. If you contact and email Melissa, you all know who she is, at least 3 days in advance, then we will do everything we can to make sure we can fit you into the schedule, and we will have a staff person from my side to set up that call and make that happen. So it's not perfect, but it's the best that we can do right now, and so that concludes my chair's report. Can I get I move that we accept my chair's report. Thank you very much. Martin will move that. Great. Okay, so now we're going to get to the working groups. Hang on tight, you're next. We have the communications working group. Who would like to speak from that working group? Who's the lead? Is that? Hi, Darren. Darren, I believe you also have an item on the agenda.
Yes.
Is that the work that came out of your working group?
Some of it, but there's additional work as well.
Okay, did you want to provide a quick report then?
I will, yeah.
Okay.
So the Communications Working Group met on January 20th and February 14th. At our January meeting, we reviewed the consultation questions that Nicole had sent us, I believe, in relation to the multi-year accessibility plan and the forthcoming accessibility policy. And we provided Nicole with some additional questions related to information and communications. At that meeting, we also established the working group's mandate, which is to review any programs, policies, or initiatives within reason being produced by staff that relates to information and communications, and to bring forth any information and communications related issues to DIAC when deemed necessary with an appropriate recommendation for resolution. At our February 14th meeting, we established our meeting schedule for the rest of the year, and we had developed some additional questions which were sent to Nicole for response. And going forward, we'll be establishing our working plan for the remainder of the year. So that's it for us.
Great. Thank you very much, Darren, for that report. And just as a reminder for those who are in the committee, the members of the Communication Working Group is Yin, Darren, of course, and Rahima and Stephanie. Thank you very much for that good work. It sounds like you guys are really plodding away. So our next working group is, and I'm going to we're going to receive all the reports at the same time. Our next working group is the Employment Working Group, and I believe there is a lead. Wendy?
Thank you. So our report is very similar. We do have an item on the agenda that I'll speak to in more detail, but this is to let everybody know that the Employment Working Group met. At the meeting, and in attendance were all committee members, so that's Monica, Yin, myself, Victoria, and Tom. We also discussed our mandate at the meeting, so we see the committee as having a responsibility to delve a bit deeper into employment issues and to strategize and help to move forward on those issues through reports back to the larger committee here. We did also establish our schedule, at least for the next two meetings, but largely we're also looking for responses from the city on our item to be able to establish how often we want to meet, what our next steps are. I am the chair of the committee. The vice chair is Monica, for the record. And I'll speak a little bit more to our item as it comes up in the agenda.
Great. Thank you very much, Wendy. The Housing Working Group. Who is the lead for that working group?
I'm part of the housing group. Terry Lynn is part of the housing group, and Rahima.
Great.
And unfortunately, we have not all yet met together. Terry Lynn and I have had some conversations and some emails with respect to work that was started in the last committee from the last housing group. Terry Lynn was a part of that, so she's put together a one-pager on some of the initiatives that were started then, things to follow up on. And we've had a few discussions, email discussions on areas that we could delve into, but we've not chosen a lead yet because unfortunately the three of us haven't gotten together in one place yet.
Great. Joe, thank you very much. And I recognize I actually have a note from Terry Lynn, which I think is her report. So she's asked that I read that. So thank you for the comments. I'm just going to supplement it. The Housing Working Group held brief electronic meetings on the 19th and 20th of March. We reviewed the past history of the Housing Working Group Committee and discussed future directions of this subcommittee. We've decided that the need for accessible shelters in the City of Toronto is great, and we would like to ask that Shelter Housing Supports Administration be invited back to a future committee meeting to deliver an update to DAAC on the progress of accessibility in shelters, as well as plans that have been developed as to providing attendant care to those who need it within the shelter system. The city last gave a presentation about some accessibility plans for city shelters in April 2016, and they agreed that at that time they would give an updated report. We further invite DAAC members to submit concerns and ideas to the Housing Working Group as they may arise. And Terry Lynn, who's not here, asked also that I read this quick remark on her behalf about some other matters. She wanted us to know that she fully supports Ian Brown's motion regarding the Canada 150 celebrations, and she also wanted to share that Canada 150 celebrations are resisted by many Indigenous communities given the deep and entrenched history of anti-Indigenous racism and colonialism in Canada, and any conversation about Canada 150 events need to occur with the acknowledgement of historical and settler colonial relations in Canada. So those are her remarks for another item. I just realized that that's what it was. So can we hear from the Transportation Working Group? Martin, Councillor Davis, Terry Lynn, and Monica Winkler. Did you folks meet? Did you have a chance? No? Okay. So we can pass maybe, and we'll have you come back at the next meeting then. Okay, great. Those are all wonderful reports. Thank you very much. I know we didn't have a lot of time between our last meeting, you meeting for the working group, and now us meeting again. But for those who did get together to do some work, I think we're off to a great start. I move that we receive all the working group reports for information. Okay, those in favor? Great. Let's move along. Okay, so we're on to item number 2, the effectiveness of the redesigned utility bill, and we have a presentation from staff. Casey, it's all yours.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Casey Brendan. I am the Director of Revenue Services for the City of Toronto. And Revenue Services is the division that issues property tax bills, utility bills, collects municipal land transfer tax revenue, and collects parking ticket revenues. I am joined today by Sarah Jackson, our supervisor in Policy and Legislation Unit, and we're here to report on Toronto's new utility bill. We were previously before, at that time, the Disability Issues Committee in July of 2014, June of 2014, and we agreed that we would report back to this committee after a year following the implementation of the new utility bill. So the new utility bill was launched in January 2016, and we're here now to report on the effectiveness of the bill. So I have a presentation here. I will walk you through. If you have questions, we're happy to answer your questions. So again, the utility bill was born from a motion that was adopted by Toronto City Council in November 2012. And that motion asked that staff review the city's current utility bill to provide greater clarity and put some information that allowed a comparison of someone's water consumption to average usage, and additional information and tools that would allow customers and consumers to track their consumption and to look at accessibility considerations, including larger typeface and the use of pictographs and other information that would make it easier for the public and people with disabilities to understand the bill. So in January 2014, this was approved. The Government Management Committee approved a prototype for the new bill design. And in designing the new utility bill, we looked at a number of design considerations. And they were all aimed at making the bill clearer, easier to read, easier to understand. And so we looked at using graphics where the old bill had not used graphics, and colors and icons so that it would be easy to see which part dealt with water billing, which part dealt with solid waste billing. And I should mention the utility bill is a bill for both water usage, consumption, sewer, and for solid waste billing. So the new bill also includes usage information for water and the use of graphics for clarity to actually show consumption in a graphic form that makes it easier for people to understand. We also employed larger fonts for readability and for compliance with the AODA that requires a minimum 10-point font for printed material. And simple billing summaries where it's easy to see from the very first page of your bill, what's your total water charge, what's your total solid waste charge, what's the total bill amount. If you then need details, they would be attached on separate pages of the bill, so you had that level of detail if you needed it. So I will walk you through now some of the features of the new bill, and we're quite pleased with the way the bill looks and has been received. It was designed, again, with clarity in mind, and so it includes, your bill now includes a summary of the charges, as I said, water, utility, water and solid waste, rather, and a total. It indicates payments that have received the amount of your last payment. It identifies the balance, if there is any balance outstanding or balance owing. It includes a breakdown for water and sewer separately and for solid waste separately. It clearly identifies the total amount due, and it identifies the total amount due if you pay to get the early payment discount. The bill also features simplified billing calculations, and so we were very careful in designing the bill to make it clear. In most cases, water consumption is charged by your actual consumption multiplied by a rate, and so we've made it clear you can actually see that multiplication, your consumption for that period multiplied by the water rate. For solid waste, it is the number of days in the billing period. So for water and sewer services, the bill identifies the billing period at a start and end date for the billing period, the meter readings at the start and the end of the billing period, the number of days in the billing period, total consumption, and the total amount due. That's for water and sewer. And for solid waste, we show the billing period again, start and end dates. We show the amount charged based on the size of bin that you have. We show the rebate amount that is applied. The city applies a rebate for solid waste collection, and we show the total amount due. And the slide in front of you now is a simple bar graph. This is customer-specific information that we're able to put on the utility bill. It's a bar graph showing consumption based on the current bill period and 3 preceding bill periods. So you can see, am I consuming more or less water than my previous 3 billing periods? And we bill every 4 months, so each bar on the bar graph represents a 4-month period, and they're labeled May to September, October to December, January to April, and May to September. So you're comparing this year current billing period against 1 year ago and all the intervening periods. In terms of accessibility, the new bill was designed with accessibility in mind, and it was designed to ensure that homeowners and residents have access to the same information, but in a format that will meet a particular customer's needs. The AODA, as you know, requires that a person's disability is taken into account when we communicate with them, And so we offer accessible formats and other communication supports. We also considered age limitations, language limitations, and various forms of disability. The accessible formats that we offer, and this is for our utility bill itself and for the brochure that accompanies the bill, is sent out based on the customer's stated preference. And so we produce a large print version of our bill and brochure, machine readable formats, and other assistive formats usable by persons with disabilities. In terms of communication support, we have augmentative communication supports, we offer translation services, and we utilized plain language in the bill, in designing the bill, to make sure that it's clearly understood. In terms of accessibility, again, the utility bill, we were anxious to make sure that the availability of these accessible formats was made known, and so the utility bill on the front of the bill and on the reverse of the bill identifies that this bill is available in accessible formats, and we provide information on how to reach the city to advise that you would request a bill in a different format. Again, as I mentioned, the utility bill brochures have been and will continue to be made available in large print on the city's website. So if you get the bill in the mail and it's unreadable because the print is too small, a large print version is available on the city's website. And the large print for the bill itself features a minimum font size of 12 point, but it can be produced in any size depending on a customer's stated need. And we have examples, we brought examples with us of what a large print font looks like. In terms of printing, we dealt with a print vendor so that we are actually able to use smart messaging on specific bills. And so the messaging that appears on the utility bill actually is specific to your property, your account. So if your account is overdue, you get a specific message that says your account is overdue. If your billing is based on an estimated billing rather than an actual meter reading, it will identify that as well. So on one side of the bill, there is messaging that is specific to the customer so that the bill is more or less personalized to that customer. We also went to standardized formats in terms of bill size. It's a regular legal size page, 8.5 by 14, which makes it easier for printing and reproduction. And for non-critical messages or corporate messages or additional information, we use the brochure. So the bill is simply the billing information. All the other information that we like to convey from Toronto Water, from Solid Waste Management Services, appears in the brochure. Beyond the bill itself, we are improving and have been improving access to utility information so that customers, we've introduced an online utility account lookup so that customers can actually go online and they can see the same information that appears on the bill. They can see their account status, their account balance, any overdue amounts. You can find out your next payment due date, and you can find out billing and payment details. That has been very successful in terms of customers. Instead of calling, they can now go online and they can actually see that information for themselves. You're looking at your utility account, and so it's a secure site. You have to enter information that identifies you as a user, but it's been very helpful in putting that information out there. People can self-serve for that information. And more recently, we've launched an online tax and utility certificate. You use a tax and utility certificate usually when you're selling a property. Lawyers request these at a sale of a property. It tells you how much water is consumed and what the bill amount is up until the date of sale. And so this is now, instead of a manual process, this is now online. Most of the legal community, when they require these certificates, have gone online to request it and receive it. And that certificate, instead of a 5 to 10 day turnaround, is usually available within two business days now. That is the presentation that I have for you. I'm happy to entertain any questions the committee has.
Great. Are there any questions? One from Yin.
Yin? I remember Yin from last time being here.
Yes, go ahead, Yin, please.
Wondering about the Braille format, do you provide that?
Yes, we have. We do offer Braille format, so if a customer wishes their bill in Braille, we can provide that. We've had very limited requests for Braille to date, because usually another machine-readable format is available, but if a customer has stated that that is their preference, we are producing bills in Braille, and we're developing a vendor that can produce these. If we have more requests, we have a vendor that will produce these in Braille.
Great. A question from Wendy and then Stephanie.
I'm just wondering about the, how do customers let their preferences be known? Is it that they call you and they tell you, can they email you? And also, in particular, I'm wondering about people within the deaf community and how they would express their preferences around what they would like as a bill.
Okay, thanks for the question. Yes, in fact, the accessible format, I mean, we will mail a utility bill in the standard format to all property owners. We ask that customers who would like the bill in an accessible format contact us by telephone by 311. 311 is actually the intake for those types of requests. And so they will identify, a caller who will identify, I would like my bill in large print or in Braille or an electronic format. And once we receive a request, we actually note that within our utility billing system. And so that you don't have to call in each and every time. Once you've identified your request once, that information is retained in our system, so subsequent bills will be in the same format. For customers who have a hearing disability, we do offer the TTY service through our call center and through 311. And so the number for TTY is actually given on the utility bill, on the reverse of the utility bill under the accessibility information.
Stephanie?
I want to thank you for all the work that's been done, and this has been incredible, and you've made great strides. Just to follow up to Wendy's question about the deaf community, if someone wanted to have the bill explained or go through it in American Sign Language, do you have that capability, or did they have to get their own interpreter to communicate with you?
That's a good question. That is a request that we have not received yet. And as I said, we put this out there not really knowing how many people may want to see or may want to receive their bill in a different format. And so where we have received requests, we've dealt with those. We would have the ability, certainly, to have someone read through a bill, but we haven't explored the idea of sign language translation. If we did, I guess we would go out looking for a service that provides that service. To date, we haven't seen that.
Keep going, Stephanie, you've got time.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, just food for thought, is there a capability of putting on your online information, even just a sign language version of just the explanation you've just given us about walking someone through the bill? Because do you have that capability to do that? And then it's there, someone using ASL can go in and click on the ASL button and have the bill explained generically.
We would consider that, as I said, you know, we've put it out there to see what kind of formats are requested. I'm not even familiar with, if you have on the website, how does it come across through ASL?
So you would have a pre-videoed version of it?
Okay.
And then a link that would sort of have a person there, and it would say ASL, and the person reading it would just click on that, and the video would pop up explaining the whole bill.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that we would consider. As I said, we would contract out for that service for somebody, and they would be able to give an overview of what the utility bill contains. Wouldn't be able to give specific details as to your bills, but certainly about how to request for services or where to go for additional information. Yes, that could be made available through the city's website.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Martin and then Joe.
Hi there. You spoke about the water bill, but what about the property tax? Do you get the same sort of level of accessibility for that as well?
Yes, thanks for your question. Yes, our property tax bill also has messages for accessibility, and so we can produce a property tax bill and the brochures that accompany the bill in accessible formats, and we have done that. We have received requests, and again, once the request is received, it's recorded in our system, and subsequent bills would be generated based on that customer's preference.
Okay, and are you currently sending these out, both the utility and the property tax? Can you receive them via email, or is it still on paper?
We offer electronic versions of the bills through e-post.
Okay.
Which is the electronic version,
Fantastic.
and it requires you to sign up for it with e-post, which is the Canada Post service.
Okay. My last question then, the electronic version, I would gather they're PDFs. Are they tagged PDF, or are they tagged for accessibility?
That's a good question. Actually, you just answered the question.
Sorry. Hi. We currently do not have a fully digital accessible copy. We are in the works. What we do, if someone requires a fully readable version, is we will reproduce that in Word.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Because the tagged PDF is a great solution, so if you could follow that up, that would be fantastic.
We will. Thank you.
And in fact, I will mention that we are in the process, while we currently offer electronic billing through e-post, we are in the process of requesting an RFP, a request for proposal, for print services that will include electronic billing services. And so we hope to be able to offer the city's own version of an electronic bill format. And at that time, and that's still a year or two away, but at that time, yes, we would certainly consider that anything we sent electronically is accessible or PDF tagged.
Great. Joe?
Hi. The online service, the websites you referenced, are they fully accessible as well?
Yes, I believe they are. What would make them, what would distinguish them as fully accessible?
Well, I guess all the AOTA requirements for an online present, are they accessible to screen readers and, any other sort of alternative formats? ASL was mentioned, these sorts of things.
Yes.
Font size, contrast, all these issues with websites.
So not currently, as Casey mentioned, the ASL. We don't have that right now, but our website corporately is fully accessible. Yes.
Any other questions? Actually, I have a question, Casey. I want to understand when comments, when you said that there's, or actually I think, when it was described that you don't have a fully digitized invoice for the utility bill or the tax bill yet, property tax bill, and that it's in progress, how long can we anticipate, when can we anticipate that work to be completed?
So the bill that goes out now electronically, the question was electronic billing, is a PDF document. And that's what we send to Canada Post to deliver via e-post. What we're contracting for is the service of a new print vendor. The people that print our bills will also host an electronic billing service that will produce electronic bills, because we found the take-up for Canada Post has been disappointing, in that we would have thought more people would be interested in receiving their bill electronically. We think if we sent out our bill electronically, we would have an increased demand for that. Your question was about the timing, sorry. Your question about the timing, so our RFP for print services is going out this year?
This year.
This year, and so we would hope to have a supplier in place for sometime in 2018. And so if it could be launched in 2018, that would be our priority.
And so in 2018, then we can expect to see a full digital bill. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's what we're hoping for. That's our timeline, and the project has been identified. There's capital funds associated with it to do that electronic billing.
And the difference between the vendor doing it as a third-party supplier and the city doing it, what's the advantage? Because you're already struggling with it, and now we're about to send out a contract to have somebody else do it. But are you measuring uptake? Is it going to be, how will you measure success?
Well, certainly on uptake would be a measure of success. Our thoughts surrounding having the service provided by an external service provider is we can get there and have an electronic billing far sooner than we could if we tried to do it internally, because we would be working with the city's corporate INT department to produce a bill in electronic format. We know that there are vendors that do this now for other utility companies like Hydro that could provide this as a service probably faster and sooner and cheaper than we could if we tried to do it internally. So we're simply putting it out there as part of the request for proposal, as an option. If they can provide this service, then we would exercise that service.
If that is the case and there's a successful vendor, and are you then closing down your own internal efforts to create that digital bill?
They would create the bill on our behalf.
Yeah. So therefore, you no longer will be continuing your work in-house to create that bill.
Well, we would still be producing the bills. I mean, our print vendor, we simply prepare the information and send the billing information to our print vendors. Right now, the bills that are received in hard copy are printed and mailed through an external company, which prints and mails the bills based on information they get from us. In the case of e-billing, it would be the same thing. They would get the billing information from us. They would host e-billing service so that customers could register online, say, here is the email address that I'd like my bill delivered, and the bill would be delivered to them in electronic format to their email.
So my question was, does that mean that you will no longer be providing that service besides the data collection? Because what I'm hearing is that the City of Toronto controls and collects and maintains the data, and then we outsource that, and then so
Printing,
there's a
yes.
company to print, and then there will now be very soon an RFP awarded to a company that's going to manage the electronic communication, correct?
Yes.
Is that okay? So therefore, what will the city be doing?
We'll be doing exactly what we do now.
Still collecting the information, but then sending it off to someone else to print, to distribute, and to then create the electronic bill?
It would be, yes, it would be exactly what we do now in terms of we compile the information on billing dates, we extract billing data, and we send it to a vendor either to produce a print bill, traditional print bill, or an electronic bill. And so that is very similar to what we do now, even for electronic billing that we do now through Canada Post. We send them that information, and the PDF is produced to send to Canada Post. So our operations would not change. We would be doing pretty much the same thing. The delivery agent would be an external third party to provide that service.
Okay, thank you. That does answer my question. Councillor Davis?
It prompted a question for me. One of the things I see at the East York Civic Centre, people who line up because they want personal service, and often it's because they have questions, and I'm wondering if you're doing email communication, why you wouldn't also offer some service to accompany the e-bill that allows questions and answers. If it were done in-house, you could certainly accommodate that kind of communication as well. Or is all communication by phone and is always going to be by phone or in person?
No, for revenue services, we offer telephone communication.
Yeah.
Both via 311, so that it's accessible accessible by phone. We have a Tier 2 call center to handle more complicated inquiries, and our presence at cash counters, our customer service counters that are in all the Civic Center locations would still be maintained. And so we don't have any plans to change the way that we operate now in terms of how we serve our customers. They want the information, they can come to the counter, they can call us by phone, they can come to Revenue Services offices for that information. We wouldn't be looking to contract out that customer service aspect of our business.
I'm not asking that. I'm saying if you're offering email billing,
Yep.
whether there would be the possibility of email communication related to that service. In other words, I get an e-bill and I say, whoa, that's wrong. I already paid that, Mr.
Okay.
Brendan Casey. Casey Brendan. Do you have any kind of email communication?
Yes, right now.
311, probably.
Yeah, right now, no, we have an email. If customers want to approach us by email, we have an email utility bill at toronto.ca. So if you want to email us now, we will respond to an email inquiry via email.
Is it secure? Tax information is confidential.
Yes, it's an email service, and yes, we only provide the information to the customer that has sent us the inquiry. But I think your question was, once a customer has identified that they would like to receive their communications electronically by giving us an email, then any subsequent communications would be done via email. So we send out a utility bill on a regular basis. If it's not paid, we send an overdue notice, and that goes out by mail. If you have chosen the electronic method, all of your communications would then be electronic by email from that point forward.
Okay, I'll ask later. The one other thing I wondered about was whether we ever use Skype or FaceTime as a way to communicate with people, so you can see people who may have hearing impairment. I'm just thinking about ASL.
Right. We haven't gone down that road, but that's something that we could look at, and that is something, as I said, we've turned over our call center operations to 311, and so 311 does the initial response on all of our utility inquiries.
Great. Are there any other questions?
Oh, I just have.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
I
Councillor.
didn't really see the analysis of the results, other than you said you had good results when I read the report. Can you quantify how many people responded? Did you have suggestions? Did you make changes? What kind of actual feedback was there?
Most of the feedback, and as I said, the report identifies that most of the feedback that we've received is verbal and anecdotal, because it's received generally through the call center. And so when people call to say, you know, the new utility bill format is great, that's usually a comment that we've received via telephone. And so it's very difficult to actually measure numbers. And we've had individual emails. Again, they're sort of anecdotal, that says, great bill, greatly improved on the clarity.
Okay, other than that, that's just generally your conclusion. There were no other suggested changes.
No, and the other thing that we have had is a decrease in the number of people to say, I don't understand my bill, it's confusing. There has been a decrease in those number of calls, and those calls are trackable through our call center. If you're calling to say, don't understand my bill.
Okay. You have some documentation of that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Members to speak? No? Okay, so what I'd like to do is just thank staff for their presentation. I think that just given the timeline over the review and the modifications and the redesign of the utility bill, I see that it's a constant work in progress. I also recognize that from some of the committee members' questions is that there's still perhaps additional work to be done. I would be very keen and interested in understanding fully when the digital bill is going to come out, and ensuring that the user experience is going to help inform any future redesigns of the bill, because I think that's what ultimately we're trying to strive for as an outcome. And then to move that we receive this information and presentation. So I see Stephanie's hand go up, and we will do that. And thank you to staff for your time today. Great, thank you. So moving along to item number 3, Canada 150 celebration. We held this item down for Yin. And Yin, would you like to speak to it, or did you have any comments for us? Thank you.
It's just, we hear that there are a lot of 150th anniversary celebrations going on. For those with sensory and other disabilities, we don't sometimes get the information as readily, and therefore we don't participate. Or likewise, when we do go to the venue or try to participate, then again, the communication part is lacking. So my motion is to have someone from the city to come and explain to us how they are ensuring that all these festivities are going to be accessible, especially in the communication and information area, because surely, yeah, hopefully they will be, accessible for wheelchair users and all that, but just to even know what's happening, across the city, and whether when we get there, we will have equal access to what's going on. That's why the motion is there, to invite someone from the city to come and tell us how it's being done. Someone can read the motion? I don't have it in front of me.
Sure, Yin, I could read the motion for you. And this is a motion that's being moved on behalf of the Communications Working Group. The recommendation reads I'm just going to read the recommendation, not the entire letter, that the General Manager of Economic Development and Culture be requested to present to the May 19, 2017 meeting of the Disabilities Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee on the measures taken to ensure accessibility at city-funded events and related programming plan for Canada 150 celebrations, especially in their communications and information formats for public outreach, publicity, and participation. Okay. Any questions of the mover? No? Pretty straightforward. I think we can certainly have the General Manager of ECDEV accommodate that request. So we will just move to adopt the recommendations in the report, and Yin has moved that. All those in favor indicate your support. Thank you. Okay, great. And I think I just want to bring to your attention the remarks that I read earlier on behalf of Terry Lynn, asking us to respect the Indigenous community and the settler-colonial relationships that still exist as we move forward to the 150 celebrations. Item number 4, employment for persons with disabilities at the City of Toronto. This was held on behalf of Wendy, who moved this motion on behalf of the Employment Working Group. Did you want to speak to your motion?
Please. So this motion comes out of the meeting of the Employment Working Group. And really what it represents, I think, is the committee sort of grappling with our understanding of the current status of employment for persons with disabilities within the City of Toronto. So the recommendation from the committee has been to request a presentation from Equity, Diversity, and Human Rights and the Executive Director of Human Resources. So the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Human Rights and the Executive Director of Human Resources report and make a presentation to us for the May 19th, 2017 meeting of the DIAC on a number of different points. So if it's okay with you, I'll just go through them. So we would like to understand the current representation rates of employees with disabilities within the City of Toronto workforce. We'd like to have more information about data sources that track disability within the City of Toronto workforce. What are they? Who do they target? What do they measure? This in particular was something that was discussed at our meeting. We have a sense of a range of different kinds of data sources, but we're not entirely sure how they're collected, who they target, and what they're intended to do. We'd like some more information about the onboarding process for employees with disabilities. How is it conducted? And also the accommodations processes for employees at the city. How do they work? Can we have a little bit more information about what happens in that process? Are there issues that need to be addressed? Retention, promotion, and exit of employees with disabilities. What is known about these states within the workforce of the City of Toronto? We would like an overview of some of the programs that are funded by the City of Toronto that are intended to support the employment of people with disabilities. What are the existing programs? How do they work? Who do they target? Who are the partners, in particular, that the city engages with on joint initiatives related to disability and employment? Are the initiatives successful? So what can be told to us as members of this committee about how those initiatives work and how they measure success? And 2 particular initiatives that we discussed, the City of Toronto Job Fair at the Reference Library, and how can this job fair better target people with disabilities? And we were also wondering about the Equity Summit on Accessible Employment that was held before my time, actually, on October 26, 2015. What were the follow-up steps that came out of that initiative? So this is on behalf of the Employment Working Group. The request has been made for the presentation in the form of this letter. But I guess I just wanted to speak to it and see if there was anything from the larger committee that you think needs to be represented here. The Employment Working Group, we see ourselves as a subcommittee. We can raise some of these issues and discuss it as a smaller group, but ultimately it comes back to the broader committee for input. So I'd just like to open it up for that.
So thank you very much, Wendy. Are there any questions or perhaps some feedback that is being asked? No. Stephanie and then Karim.
Yeah,
Karma, sorry. Stephanie and then Karma.
Okay. No, it's very comprehensive. I think it's an excellent letter and excellent piece of work. I don't really have anything to add, but yeah, it's good.
Irma?
I was going to say to maybe see what kind of training the City of Toronto staff, like the managers, receive on this matter. And the other one also would be, I don't know if this is already being done or not, but to know about, if the employees that city staff that do have disabilities, like how do they feel working for the city? Like if they face discrimination or anything along those lines, or any other barriers?
I think those are both excellent suggestions. So one being, what is the training? So perhaps we can amend this letter. Is that possible at this point? To include, and I'm looking around at committee members, and if there's any objections, then we can talk about it. But I'd certainly be open to amending the letter to include inquiring about training that managers might receive around equity and disability issues. And also understanding, and I think your second point actually speaks to maybe some of the data sources. So are there any data sources in particular that speak to the work experience of employees with disabilities, and what can we hear about that? So I'm just not sure what the process is here.
Okay, so Janice is actually jotting down the request. I think she's going to put that into some language and onto the screen as an amendment to the letter. But I know that while she's preparing that and getting it ready for the screen, Nicole would also like to I guess, give us a point of reference with respect to the requests known as item F. And then I see Councillor Davis's hand and then Joe's hand afterwards.
So it occurred to me that item F, being the one that says requesting an overview of programs funded by the City of Toronto intended to support the employment of people with disabilities. If you're thinking of supports that are provided to the public, then it would be a request to a separate division. So you may need to request probably as a separate presentation because the topic is getting bigger and bigger. But I would believe that that might be, for example, Toronto Employment Social Services. So you may be asking a different division if that's the intent of the question. If your intent is to ask the programs that are funded by the city to help people find employment.
I don't think that we were considering that within the original discussion. We were considering
Could you clarify then what F means? Because that's what it meant to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to clarify it. So for us, it was employees within the City of Toronto. So it's not necessarily, although actually, I think it is about what are the existing programs. So no, they are facing, sorry, Nicole, they are facing towards the public. So we're wondering, we were talking about, in fact, not understanding the range of programs that are available to support people with disabilities in terms of accessing employment in this context within the City of Toronto. So does that clarify for you? I don't think necessarily we're talking about programs in this discussion that support people with disabilities and accessing employment elsewhere. I think we were talking about employment within the City of Toronto, although I think that that's probably a topic that we might want to talk about for another conversation, another presentation. Does that help?
It does. It's still worded in a way that, to me, very strongly would suggest that it's talking about supporting members of the public that are job seekers. But of course, if they were applying to employment at the city, then they're...
We put in at the city after employment, and then I think what I would like to suggest to the subcommittee, to the working group, is that we talk about the second element of it at our next meeting. So I think that you're right, it is a rather large topic. I think if we start by looking at what happens internally, that's a place for us to start for this presentation that we've requested. But certainly, I think that we are interested in the other piece that you're talking about as well. And if it seems like it's getting to be too big, then we can put that off for a second presentation.
Just to clarify, and I know that I heard Councillor Davis providing perhaps a wordsmith solution, but can we read the entire portion of F with the inclusion of the new language? Can we do that? I think we're there, we're definitely there. And I think also it'd be helpful for Janice as well, because she was
Okay.
working on,
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I understand. F, an overview of programs funded by the City of Toronto intended to support the employment of people with disabilities at the City of Toronto. What are the existing programs, how do they work, and who do they target? Who are the partners the city engages with on joint initiatives related to disability and employment? We could also put a second at the City of Toronto in there. Are these initiatives successful? So hopefully that would clarify the split that you're talking about, Nicole, and then I think it does still raise an interesting second piece for us to talk about as a committee.
so just to clarify, Janice, did you get that? Okay, so she's got that. And I believe Councillor Davis, did you have comments or feedback?
I just want to say, I think it's excellent, and we'll give this committee a good snapshot of what's going on. We've been waiting for years to get a good result out of our internal surveys to look at baseline data for the purposes of having some kind of an employment equity strategy at the city. And it's taken a very, very long time. So it'd be very good to look at it in the context of this committee. We do have programs of various kinds that we work in partnership with other agencies and that we fund that specifically focus on providing employment opportunities for newcomers in particular, or racialized communities. And I don't know whether they're, so profession to profession, career bridge, various other partnered programs with both private, I guess mostly private sector, although I'm sure with some of our nonprofit agency partners. And it would be useful to understand, I think it'd be terrific to understand whether there are any other programs that help us to provide employment opportunities for people with disabilities. So that's, I think it's a good piece of work.
Well, I was going to also mention, maybe part of F could also include specific questions around students, post-secondary students, and the recruitment of post-secondary students. And the other thing, which I don't know if it'll fit into the employment aspect or not, but I do remember a couple of years ago, maybe almost 10 years ago now, there was this initiative to have more women run as city councillors. And so there was like these mentoring programs, right, for that. So one aspect, I know it doesn't fit into, maybe it doesn't fit into employment 100%, but one aspect could be what is the city doing to increase maybe the number of people with disabilities running for elections, right? So I don't know if just like civic education really, I guess, or mentoring, so.
Good point. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Is there anyone on this side of the room, on my left side, who's got questions or comments? No? Okay, so Councillor Davis.
Well, the one thing we could also get an updated report on is our civic appointments. I don't know whether that's happened at this committee or not, but the representation of appointees to our agencies, boards, and commissions is something that would be useful to look at, and whether or not our recruitment and outreach is sufficient, because I know that we have struggled to make sure that representation on our agencies, boards, and commissions is representative. And we have a policy that calls on the city to ensure that the appointments reflect the population, and it's measured regularly, looked at regularly in terms of representation of ethno-racial groups, LGBT representation, and disability. And it would be good to look at that here if you're interested in that as well. Because we appoint probably 250 people. There will be another round of appointees for something called the Administrative Penalty Tribunal, which is now going to be an alternative appeal body for parking tickets. That's coming up soon, and we're going to be appointing 60 people to that who have mostly judicial or quasi-judicial kinds of experience, but there'll be even more opportunities.
Monica?
I'd like to comment on Councillor Davies' suggestion about the disability in the appointments. I was at the Accessible Elections Advisory Group meeting, and her name escapes me right now. I'm really mad that it does, but anyway. She gave us a presentation on that with some figures, and I know that she's interested in possibly presenting here to us. So that is part of that has been suggested and is in sort of working at the moment. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much. I know that Janice has actually prepared a couple of motions, which I will get to, but I want to just speak to the fact that we've now got a couple of emerging issues that have come out of this discussion. One is around civic appointments, and the other one is about encouraging greater civic engagement within diverse communities. I wonder if we can table that perhaps as additional work for the communications working group, and maybe think through what action you might want to see be directed to the city, and bring that back at our next day at committee. So that because right now the letter is very much focused on employment, and I don't want us to take away from that. So I just want to read and put on the screen. Karma, this is a recommendation I believe is coming for you. Janice has helped us put together some language. And I wasn't sure if this was in relationship to a specific recommendation in Wendy's letter, or is this a standalone piece? But it reads, a motion moved by Karma that information on training for management be included in the presentation. Did you want to attach that to any of the the A to G points, or is it just a standalone piece? Standalone piece? Okay, so you're satisfied with the language? Okay, great. And then the other one was to see if we can finesse recommendation F, and so you can just see it on the screen. No problems. So because we had the language City of Toronto repeated twice, we've just moved it around. So I'll just read you the first sentence, and you can follow along on the page if you can see, but here it goes. And it's now on the screen, but I'll read it to you. And review an overview of city-funded programs intended to support employment of people with disabilities at the city. So you'll recognize that we took out the language City of Toronto, and we rejigged it and put it at the end of the sentence. Everything else about the body of the recommendation, the balance of the recommendation remains the same. Wendy and your committee, is that agreeable? Okay, we're on the right track. Okay, so are there any other comments or feedback to the overall recommendation and the content of the letter? Because if there are none, then I'm going to ask that we move to adopt the item as amended. Okay, great. All those in favor indicate your support. Thank you. That's for the amendment as well as the motion as amended. Thank you very much. Good work, everyone. Thanks, Janice, for keeping us on track. Item number 5. Oh, this is my favorite. Monica, you want to rename this committee?
Okay, I'd first like to start off that I participated in the renaming of the committee in 2015 and recall the lengthy discussions that led to the new name. So given the time and effort that was invested, I do not make this recommendation lightly. When I was at the Accessible Elections Advisory Group meeting, I stumbled horribly over our name, and that brought forth a lot of discussion from various people, including Rahima, that our name is impossible for people to remember completely correctly, and DIAC doesn't speak to anything that brings disability or accessibility to people's minds. And so Nicole was at the meeting, and she also noted that in the AODA, that there is specific language, and for the exact reference, it's Chapter 11, Section 29, and it would help remove the confusion on the part of city staff and members of the public that have difficulty identifying the committee by the complex name that was selected in 2015. So basically what it says in Part 29, or sorry, Section 29, is the council of every municipality having a population of not less than 10,000 shall establish an accessible advisory committee or continue any such committee that was established before the day this section comes into force. I've noticed that a lot of communities, I didn't bring a list with me so I don't have an actual names I can show you, but accessible advisory committee is becoming what people are searching for online when they're looking for this type of committee within their city. And what we have chosen as a name in 2015 just doesn't bring that forward quite as easily. So quite simply, I would like to recommend that the name of the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee be changed to the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee. Simple, clear, it says exactly what we are, and it brings us back to the AODA, which makes us exist in the first place.
Thank you. I think, Monica, that was really clear in your summary of the purpose and the reason why. Let's open it up to the floor for discussion. Darren?
Just a point of clarification. I'm wondering if you can, Monica, or anyone else who was involved with the name change in 2015, what was the rationale behind going with the current name of the committee and not using Accessibility Advisory Committee?
Actually, nobody brought up Accessibility Advisory Committee. The problem is that we were called the Disability Issues Committee. And so everything around disability was an issue. And that really nobody really felt comfortable with that. And the discussion delved into, well, we're more than just disability, we're about accessibility, we're about inclusion, and it went on, and we got all confused about everything that we should be representing for this committee, and that's how this name came up. And we were also looking at the acronym to make sure that that didn't go weird. So, that's basically, in a nutshell, what was happening, because the original name was Disability Issues.
Darren, do you have a follow-up question or a comment?
Well, just a comment, and I would agree with you that, yes, the AODA does speak directly about accessibility advisory committees, and as someone who works in the accessibility field, you're right, the majority of municipalities that have a population over 10,000 do simply go with Accessibility Advisory Committee. So I would support this motion.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Just to add to what you said, Monica, I think at the time, too, we were looking at what were the current buzzwords, or what did we feel that the community at large would understand, and at that time, I think we thought disability was what people would understand our work is about. But I would agree that we're here a year and a half, 2 years later, and things have changed, and terminology has changed, so I would also support your motion.
Okay. Any others on the committee?
I have
Okay,
comment. Thank you. I was
Before we
expecting,
get back to you.
I just want to thank her. Can I do?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I was expecting a lot of tomatoes to be thrown at me today. This is awesome.
You're very brave. Tom?
Not tomatoes here, but just a comment on the word inclusion. I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind, because accessibility is definitely a necessary part for inclusion, but that doesn't get us into inclusion. So that the inclusion itself is a next step beyond accessibility. So I'm wondering if we really want to lose that word. But if we do, perhaps the even more simpler name would be Toronto AODA Advisory Committee. Just a comment.
Did you want to speak to the comment? So you'll probably recognize I've actually varied our format today, largely largely, not just on this item, but just overall, just largely because our agenda is quite light, and I wanted to make sure that we had some time for this discussion. Because I know there were hundreds of emails that went back and forth back in 2015 as we established the prior name, or our existing name, I should say. Monica, go ahead, and then I see Rahima, and I believe Emily is going to speak shortly.
I am not going to even attempt to tell you how many people have no clue what the AODA is. It is rather frightening at the amount of money that's been put into the education of the population by the government of Ontario, and yet people have no clue what the AODA or the AODA or whatever they call it is. We run into this all the time with small size employers because we're trying to reach out to people about that. And when I mention it even with my friends, if I say the AODA, they're like, what? And it's really frustrating, and so I'm not sure that would really help us, but just my comment.
Thank you, Monica. Rahima.
I was also at the election committee meeting, and I just said I'm from the Disability Committee. And I like the word accessibility, that's positive, and lots of tomatoes have been thrown at me because they say the word issues means all we have are problems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else in the committee? Emily, I recognize you from the general public. I know you'd like to speak. We've pretty much varied our process and procedures for today. I'm going to ask that you just roll forward to a microphone if that's what you want to do. Yeah. And introduce yourself. I think most of us know you, but introduce yourself, and you've got a few minutes here.
Very quickly.
And you're speaking to this issue, right?
Yeah,
The naming
absolutely.
of the committee.
I deputate to a lot of different city committees, including TTC, executive. In fact, I've smacked over this table because of inaccessibility. And a lot of those committees, when you try to bring up the AIG or whatever our acronym is now, they're like, huh? And you try to talk to different counselors and, huh? I've spoken at a couple of other events for accessibility and brought up our committee, and it's the new name, I can't even remember it most of the time. I have to write it down on my phone. And when I was growing up in Hamilton, it was the Accessibility Advisory Committee or Disability Advisory Committee. And I totally agree with Rahim on this one, and you. And I've got to give you kudos because it's an issue I've had for many years with this committee, and I know I'm not on it. Just health issues have precluded that until recently, and I just want to say thank you for bringing this up because as somebody who deputates a lot and somebody who works very diligently to create more accessibility, including here at City Hall especially, it's something that has come up. I can't count the number of counselors that have literally gone like this, going, scratching my head here, going, what? My favorite one was James Pasternak. I was deputating, and he kind of did this in his head. Just tilted it sideways, gave me an eyebrow in the air, and goes, what? And I'm like, okay, that's enough. I got to deputate on this one. So, yeah, thank you very much for bringing this up. And I, as somebody out on the outside, I call myself a roving member. I would really I would be more than willing to back you up on this one. Thanks.
Emily, thank you very much. Are there any other members who would like to speak to the matter? No? Okay, so I think we should probably take this to a vote. And I want to thank Monica for being the brave member to advance this particular issue. And I think it is certainly one of the objectives when I first became the chair at the very beginning of the term was that this committee wanted to elevate the profile of its work. It wanted to be known, it wanted to be helpful in advising the city on policies and programs to enhance to ensure that accessibility was going to be top of mind. And I think with all good intentions, the name was certainly broad and inclusive when the revision was made in 2015. But I think it also has, as you have stated in your letter and in your remarks today, created some confusion. I'm discouraged to hear that perhaps there are some councillors who don't know the name of this committee, or perhaps what this committee, that this committee even exists, because our agenda items go right through to the executive committee every single month and follow through to city council. So I think it's best that we all encourage them and make it as easy as possible and accessible as possible for them to remember our name and also the good work that this committee does. Perhaps a body of work that may flow through from the renaming of this committee again is perhaps to think through some communication design, public-facing pieces, so such as a logo. I know that this might be work for the communications working group, not that I'm assigning it, but I'm just simply suggesting it. But I think it's probably a good investment of our time and resources. Now, I'd like to take a recorded vote on this. Is that all right with you, Monica? Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
If I can see members indicate their support by raising their hand if they can. Monica, Joe, Martin, Rahima, support. This is in support of the recommendation? Yes. Okay. Should I read the motion? Okay, so my fault. I should have read the recommendation. The name of the Disabilities Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee be changed to Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee. Okay, and then we left off at myself, Krista Wong-Tam, Councillor Davis, Stephanie, Yin, Wendy, Darren, Tom, and Karma. So let the record reflect that that was unanimous. We will now be known as TAC. Or the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee, and I'm sure that the clerks will be making those changes as in all our future communication. And it also should be noted that we've got a new policy at the city that will be completed, so it's actually better to do it now with the new name leading the discussion as opposed to having the policy come out and then changing our name afterwards. I almost want to move a motion to create a moratorium on changing the name again until at least 2018. Okay, and we'll go, the clerk was just reminding me that this will go to council for final approval. Tom?
I wonder if, given the fact that some of the councillors are not aware of what this committee is doing, I think it's very important that they do become aware of it. Is it possible to put out a standing invitation to them to come and visit and sit in our meetings?
Yes, Tom, it certainly is, and we actually have, we did that at the very beginning of the term. We sent out letters and communication letting everybody know, including the general managers and the heads of division, letting everyone know that this committee is here to provide service and guidance, and we have received some uptake, and which is why some of those divisions have come forward to provide presentations, but it doesn't hurt for us to re-announce ourselves with our new name to those councillors, because we want them to know the good work that is happening. And I do recognize that many of them, although perhaps not the one that Emily mentioned, but there are many councillors who do know that this committee is here. Okay, so that pretty much concludes all the official business that we have on our agenda. If there's no other comments, we can probably conclude a lot earlier. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I guess there's a motion to adjourn. That's me. Okay, thank you.